strangely enough, these guys spent more time programming poetry than anything else. And so that was interesting to me, that poetry had this pull for them.
Sounds like the inmate students were taking more and more responsibility for their own education, and that you had deliberately structured the program to facilitate that process. A little bit further, it sounds like the learning opportunities from the school were permeating the whole prison. The prison was becoming more like a school.
In a certain part of the prison, it was limited, but the effects were more general over the institution. But of course, you don't reform everybody this way indirectly. But the warden was delighted that it did have a generalized effect.
To what extent were you in touch with other contributors to the field of correctional education? Were you able to consult the literature or compare notes with other practitioners who were doing similar work at other locations?
I had access to the limited literature at that time of programmed instruction, but nobody else that I knew of was, at that time, was working experimentally in a prison setting.
It's like being on the frontier, and you were a pioneer?
It was a first, I know that. First effort, and a very systematic and I thought exciting venture. And at that point I said, well, where do we go from here? Do we expand this whole program and so forth? Well, prisons have to move on. They had work to do in that prison and in the fields, the cotton fields and so forth. One of the things I was talking with the warden, I said, you know, one of the things we need here is occupational training, vocational training. And I would like to explore this. I talked with the director of vocational education in the state of Alabama at that time, Mr. John F. Ingram, and I said, can you direct me as to how we might get vocational training in the prison? They have no money and no funds, and so it's going to have to be with a grant program if we can, if there's one available, or you supply it if you have the resources. He said, I don't have the resources, but I do have an idea about how you might get funded for an experimental type of program.
What year was this?
This was in 1964. I was encouraged to write a proposal and submit it to the national, to the Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor and U.S. Office of Education for a Manpower Development and Training Act grant, MDTA grant it was called. And I gave the theory basis for it, the experimental work we can do with it, and the cost figures and so forth, and it was approved by the Department of Labor. U.S. Office of Education has some skepticism about it, but they had to go along because Labor approved, and Labor was the leader. Labor controlled the funds, and they had to, if Labor approved, U.S. Office of Education, now Department of Education, had to sign on.